G'day guys, Agates here. Russell and the team at Access Workwear and Safety have been looking after me and other tradies for years, making sure we get the clothing, equipment and boots we need when we're on the tools. Now, in their typical style, they're taking customer service to the next level and talking to experts on our behalf about life beyond the tools. And let's face it, none of us are getting any younger, so tune in and get some tips from different experts on how to look after your health, wealth, business and your team beyond the tools.
So with the retirement age now 70, not many tradies are going to spend their entire career on the tools. Today I'm welcoming Andrew Kent from Growth Creators, and Andrew's going to talk to us about that transition from on the tools to off the tools, and how tradies can grow their business during that transition time. Thanks for joining us, Andrew, and welcome. It's a challenge. Why?
I think it's partly, I think it's particularly challenging for tradies is because, like sports people, and if we look at their careers, they're much shorter, so it's often more telling, is it's a physical job. And so they've got to make the transition from playing to coaching. And while there are steps to that, so you could go, player, captain, playing coach to coach, that transition comes with some challenges, and not everyone wants to do it. So even though you know that it's going to happen, I think there are three reasons that it gets delayed and delayed too long often. So one is they want to keep playing. Another is that they really don't know how to coach because and the other is that they think they can't afford it. And so they're the three things that stop them, but that doesn't mean they shouldn't do it.
I look at myself, clearly I'm not a sportsman, but when I look at my career and transitioning, in your words, from player to player coach to coach, it's something I've enjoyed and something I certainly wouldn't want to go back to, but it has been difficult going through those processes. Is it harder for tradies and some other professions?
I think it is because they're specialists, and so another profession I'll call on is dentists. So often dental practices, dentists are obviously very smart people, very professional people, they're very specialist. And dental practices are often managed by the dental nurse. So the dental nurse often makes a transition up the scale much faster than the dentist. Now, in your case, one of the key skills of running a business is the sales process, right? Yeah. You're an experienced salesperson. In the tradies case, often they've got very little training in actually how to run a business, and none of the tool set, the on tools skills that they have really transition into the other side. So and also they don't, they have less motivation because they don't want to do it. Yeah. It's definitely harder for them.
It's you're right. I'm a salesperson. I love sales. I love customer service. It's something I try to instill into our team as well, but it's also something we've got a lot to learn about at the same time.
Yeah, and I think the challenge for you in your business, so if we sort of compare that to the tradie side of things, is you're a natural salesperson. You bring a high quality and level of service to the job, and your challenge is going to be to instill in your team the same standards, the same processes, all the other things that come naturally to you. You've got to try and get them to do. And it's the same with the tradies. If they're natural on the tools, then often that's harder for them to delegate that. And same as, some of the best players that have ever been don't turn out to be very good coaches. So there's a different skill set, a different type and role to go in that.
I'm a salesman, the phone's ringing. That's a good thing.
It's a good thing.
So we've established what's needed. What's the first step in making that happen?
Right, so we always talk about the business of promises because it's a simple sort of thing that applies to pretty much every business. So there's three parts to that. So one is, are you making the right promises? So what sort of business do you want to be in? The second part of that is, are you keeping those promises? And can you keep those promises at scale? So that's when you've got to resource it up and deal with that. And the third one is, well, how are you taking that to market? And so when we look at those and we come back to it, well, you know, what tradies often don't realise is that the making of the promise actually happens with the quote.
Yep.
And so they're actually, because they're not really understanding that quote, the importance of that quote in defining the strategic direction of their business, then and the risks associated with that, they're actually, and they don't like doing it, they're not very good at it. Yeah.
So is that the reason why we've all seen it? The same job can be put out for quote to 3 different people, and the difference that comes back in that quote that is, for all intents and purposes, for the same job?
It is. Like that's. I mean, like I don't want to put it all down to they're not very good at it. I think there's a couple of key factors in it. So one is that when they're looking at that job, they're looking at it differently in terms of who's wearing a risk, right? So the optimistic tradie goes in there and assumes that it's simpler than it is, or that the risk is going to be held by someone else. So if something goes wrong, the client will pay.
Yep.
And the pessimistic tradie at the other end has looked at all of the possible complications, assumed they're all going to happen, and built it into the quote, right? And then there's the middle ground somewhere. Now, the thing to do with the quote is to actually draw attention to what risks you're covering. So who's wearing what risk? And what that does is it draws attention from the client side of things to the fact that those risks exist.
Yep.
And which ones you're covering. So if you're the pessimist who's covered all those things, you need to make sure that you've said these are all the things I'm covering, because that then brings into mind for the client, well, this cheap quote, is he covering that or not? And they can then ask the question of the cheaper quote and go, are you covering this?
Yep.
And then all of a sudden the price starts bumping up, and also the trust factor disappears.
Yep.
And the trust factor is key, because at the end of the day, you know, most times the cheapest quote doesn't win. It's about, who do I trust to do this job to the standard that I want it done, to a price that I'm happy with. And so if you can get that combination right and get that stuff into your quote, and really if you're quoting on the same thing frequently, you can put it into the terms and conditions. So I'll just draw another example quite quickly. When you rent a car, there's an awful lot of terms and conditions on the car rental. And there's very few variables that are filled in as you do it. So I'm not saying that tradies should turn their quotes into a car hire type quote, but somewhere between just giving someone a price and doing the full extreme of car hire or you know, full contract is where you've got to think about the quote and where the risks are and so forth.
It's the same in a lot of businesses, and certainly in our business. Have we included delivery when we're quoting? Have we included embroidery if the customer wants embroidery, and all of those sorts of things? So, and it does come down to the attention to detail in that. But as you rightly say, it comes down to the partnership, the trust, the confidence that you have in your supplier, and we're again trying to instill that in our team constantly, daily. Andrew is going to join us in future sessions as well of Beyond the Tools. Thank you for joining us today. If you've got any topics or any questions of Andrew, or anything that you'd like us to bring up as part of this series, we appreciate the fact that you're enjoying these, and we're getting some great feedback. So please keep telling us what you'd like to see. Thanks again, Andrew.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks, Russ.